I'm an 18-year-old Hispanic female, but at the time that this happened, I was 14, and this story takes place in Texas. I had recently gotten out the mental health hospital and was diagnosed with chronic depression, bulimia, and body dysmorphia. The only way that I felt loved or appreciated was by having sex with older men and doing drugs. It was the summer, and I was about to start high school, and I was invited to a party with some of my older friends. We'll call them Vanessa, Kelly, and Jackie. I knew my mom wasn't going to let me go to a party after I got caught having sex with a 20-year-old at my cousin's quinceanera, so I lied and said that I was going to spend the night at one of my friends' houses. She let me go, seeing as I hadn't left the house since I got back from the hospital, and even let me stay with my friend for 2 days. I thanked her and went to my room to get my stuff ready. A few hours later, my friend Vanessa pulled up, and my mom gave me $45 just in case we wanted to get some pizza or go shopping or something. As soon as I got in the car, I smelled weed. She smiled at me with low red eyes and threw me a pack of strawberry swishers and some weed, then told me to roll one up for us. Well, I did, and we went to pick up my other friends. We then got Jackie, and then after that we went to Kelly's house to get dressed, and then we were on our way. I was pretty high and didn't realize that we had left town and we were going to Dallas. When we got there, I found it odd that it was just me, my 3 friends, and Jackie's boyfriend, who was 21 while she was 17. I didn't even say anything, thinking more people were probably just going to come later. At the time, all I had really done in the past was smoke weed and drink. My friends knew that, so they told me I didn't need to do anything else if I wasn't ready. But I really wanted to seem cool in front of them and Jackie's boyfriend, who was older. Plus, I was getting pretty bored just sitting there drinking while Kelly and Vanessa were snorting coke. They told me they had a dealer that gave them an 8-ball for a pretty cheap price. They called up the guy and said that they could meet up at his place since he was on house arrest. We got into Kwan's car, which is Jackie's boyfriend, since he had a van and he could fit us all inside of it. We were on our way and Kelly was rolling up another blunt. I got higher than I ever had been in my whole life. They told me that this was the strongest strain that they'd had ever gotten, and just to relax so no one would trip out. I was giggling at nothing and my entire body felt like I was vibrating. I felt like I was floating. When we finally got there, I could barely walk. My legs felt like jello, so Kelly helped me walk since she needed help walking too. We knocked and went inside. I think there were around 6 guys, all in their mid-20s. One caught my attention. He looked out of place. He was dressed way better than the other guys and was very attractive. I guess he noticed me too and came up to me and started talking to me. He asked me what my name was and how old I was. I told him the truth and his eyes got big. I felt awkward and asked him how old he was. He said, "I'm 24, but don't worry, I'm not a pedo," he said with a chuckle. I didn't care since I had been with 20-year-olds before. I looked over at my friends and they were all laughing and talking to the guy who was on house arrest, but I didn't pay attention. The guy asked me if I wanted to sit down on the couch with him. My legs still felt like jello, so I nodded and I sat down. He sat down next to me. He told me, "I'm Kodak, by the way." I smiled and he scooted closer. I guess he noticed that I was tensing up and he said, "Don't worry, I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable." I felt myself blush and said, "No, it's okay. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm just really high and I feel like time is just going in slow motion." He laughed and I felt stupid for saying that. "Do you want to go into my room and lay down for a sec?" I said sure, not wanting to make a fool out of myself in front of the other guys there. I told my friends I'll be back and they said okay and kept talking and laughing. I was holding on to the wall and he said, "Don't worry baby girl, I got you." He then grabbed me by my waist and took me to his room. I sat on his bed and he sat next to me. I could tell he wanted to kiss by how close he was to my face and his hand was rubbing on my thigh. I really wasn't in the mood for more than just kissing, so I just kissed him hoping that he would be satisfied with that and just let me rest. He stood up and I thought that was it. My eyes were very low, so I didn't notice him taking off his shirt until I heard his belt being undone. I looked up at him and he smiled at me. I couldn't understand what was going on. I wanted to say no, but I literally just couldn't. He tried taking my pants off and got on top of me. He started trying to kiss me. As soon as he tried unbuttoning my jeans, I screamed. He put his hand over my mouth and my friends were too busy laughing in the living room so no one heard me. He told me to shut up or he's gonna shoot my brains out. I bit his hand and he hit the side of his head with something hard. This is where I blacked out for a few minutes or seconds. I couldn't even tell. I woke up only to seeing him being on the other side of the bed almost completely naked. I didn't know how I was this conscious again, and I got up and tried to run, but my underwear was still around my ankles. He saw me and tried to run after me, but he was looking for something in the covers. I managed to pull up my underwear, grab my jeans, and run out screaming. My friends were in shock, and the guy who was on house arrest was too. They all paused to look at me, and I told them that he tried to rape me. He came out of his room, stumbling over my shoes, wearing only black gym shorts and socks. That's when we all ran for the door and ran outside. Quan grabbed the keys out of his pocket and we all jumped in. Kelly was the last one to get in, and as soon as she closed the door, we heard some gunshots and bolted the hell out of there. I was crying hysterically, and they were trying to calm me down. We drove super fast, and when we were at a stoplight, something hit us from the back. It was Kodak and his friends, with guns out their black car. They had been following us without their headlights on. I screamed at Quan to hurry up, and he did. We swerved and ended up losing them on a busy street. Quan suggested that we just go to his house, and then from there we can split, and that he'll follow behind us just in case. I didn't even want to argue. I just wanted to go back to Vanessa's house and sleep everything off. We got to his house, and Kelly, Jackie, and I went into Vanessa's car. While he switched cars into an old beat-up black Acura, Quan followed us home, and thankfully, the other guys weren't there around us. We took the long way back to Arlington and took a lot of turns just in case. Quan stayed with us since it was around 2 a.m. and he was tired. We got into Vanessa's house, and being the hippie she is, she made some lavender tea. We went to Vanessa's room upstairs so that we wouldn't wake up her parents and they wouldn't ask what happened to me. I told my friends everything that happened, and Quan said that he knows why they followed us. We all looked at him as he pulled out a bag of what looks like an ounce of cocaine from his hoodie. He apparently slipped it in his pocket while they all turned around to look at me when I came outside screaming. "You dumbass, you could've got us all killed," said Jackie. He had just stolen a ton of money's worth of cocaine. That's why they went after us. We got calls and threats for weeks because of it. It eventually stopped when Jackie called and left an anonymous tip to the police, and they got arrested. To this day, I haven't told my parents what happened, and I still have nightmares about that night. I'm a 24-year-old female from the UK. Despite a few creepy instances as a child, there has only been one time in my adult life that I truly felt primal fear. My apologies if it's a bit long, but trust me, I'm trying to be as concise as possible and need to explain the surroundings a little bit first. I live in a village in the middle of English countryside. To paint an accurate picture of the size, it has a population of around 4,000 people, but feels more like 1,000 due to its spread out nature and being surrounded on all sides by lots of fields, farms, and woods that would eventually connect onto a famous forest. Well, pretty locally famous. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and because of this, it has notoriously bad phone and internet connections. Having lived here all my life, I pretty much know the place like the back of my hand. I know where all the public footpaths are through the woods and fields, where they connect, and which shortcuts there are, and where to cross the deep streams. I've gone on walks in this area throughout my childhood, and with my parents, and alone as an adult. Nothing bad has ever happened to me, and I felt safe here. This story takes place last summer, July, after I moved back home from university and had yet to get a job and smoked a lot of weed. This was a habit that my parents sort of despised, in which I tried to keep hidden from them by going for evening walks, which included multiple pre-rolled joints hidden away in my hoodie pocket. As usual, they both got home at 5 p.m. We had dinner, but chatted for a while longer than usual, as my mom had quite a hectic day and was telling me about it. Because of this, I ended up heading out for a walk an hour later than usual, around 7 p.m. But as it was the summer, the sun was still shining, so honestly, I didn't really notice that it would start getting dark while I was still out. The woods closest to my house was less than 5 minutes away, and you enter through a gate into a farmer's field. You can see across the open area quite far until the first set of small woods, which obscures your view. That's where I was heading, as I knew this trek would take under 2 hours, and leads back onto the same path that I was standing on at the moment. More than enough time to smoke the 3 joints in my pocket, and for the smell to leave my clothing. I thought at least. This entire area is very popular for dog walkers, so it's not unusual to see other people around while you're out. And this is a village where everyone says hello to everybody. I lit my first joint and started walking. I'm just in my own world for a while until I was about less than 100 feet before the entrance to the woods. An elderly man was coming out of them, throwing a ball for his collie dog. I finished my joint and stubbed it out. As I got closer, I recognized it. It was John, who lived on the road next to mine, and he knew my grandpa. We stopped and said hello as I pet his dog Max. While I'm talking to him, I see another man come out of the woods. No dog, bright green jacket, very tall, and had a good 10 years on me age-wise. Me and John chat for another minute and say goodbye, and he warns me not to stay out here for too long as it'll start getting dark soon. He was right. The sky was bright pink and orange, and the sun was indeed beginning to set. I really hadn't noticed. I continued down the path and towards the man. We were nearly passing each other, and I looked up and made brief eye contact with him, smiled, and said hello, like everyone else does here, even if you don't recognize the person. It's just something you do here. My eyes instantly met his. He was already looking at me. His dark eyes locked onto mine, and he wasn't smiling. I didn't know him at all, but I knew something was wrong. It was in his eyes. I swallowed my politeness and looked at the ground as we passed. I had lived in my university city for the last couple of years, so I knew a red flag when I saw one. And with that, my country bumpkin manners evaporated. I quickened my pace a little bit before entering the woods, slyly looking back, and the guy was still walking in the same direction following John. I felt relieved, laughed, and cursed the weed for making me paranoid while lighting up another joint and started walking into the woods. It takes about 30 minutes to follow the path through the woods to the end. The pathway exit opened into another field that led to another set of woods. The sky was now violet. The dimming light had been obscured to me by the trees. I was already smoking my last joint and was near the entrance to the second set of woods when I felt it. Fear. Complete, crippling, absolute fear worked its way like electricity through every layer of my flesh. I'd never felt anything like it before or since, but I knew what it was. I whipped around. Standing at the exit of the first set of woods, I saw the man. I could still make out his green jacket in the fading light. He fucking doubled back, and very quickly too. I had looked back several times while in those trees, and he hadn't been there. For a second, I froze, and so did he. He had known that I saw him. To sprint the distance between us would take about 5 minutes. He was obviously in good shape too. I just threw my spliff on the floor and fucking bolted into the woods. It was the only way that I could go, and I didn't even dare look behind me. I sprinted for a couple more minutes before taking a sharp left off the path and into the trees. I was hoping to throw him off a bit, but I couldn't see a fucking thing. The light was already darkening, and the trees made it 100 times worse, especially as I was now in the thick of them. Their branches caught on my clothes like fingers, whipping and scratching my bare legs so bad I bled. I ran and ran, my lungs protesting in pain, hating me for smoking so much while my heart was throwing itself against my ribcage trying to escape. I couldn't do it anymore. I threw myself on the ground behind a particularly thick trunk, my back against it, knees on my chest, hand thrown over my mouth to try to quiet my labored breathing. I was desperately trying to pump air into my lungs for my next big sprint. I listened for the first time. A few seconds passed silently, then I heard him. Heavy footfalls snapping twigs behind me and about 20 feet to my left. I dare not to look, just in case he sees me. I have my phone, but I know I have little chance of a signal being where I was. I also knew that he would hear me talking or see the light of my phone. I'm not ashamed to say that at this point, I started to cry. The tears were silently falling down my cheeks. "What the fuck?" I hear a deep voice exclaim. "Where are you? I know you're here. I saw you." I have to clasp both hands around my mouth to stop my scream from escaping. I can hear him moving around. I panic. I find enough courage to slowly peek from around the tree. He was about 10 feet behind me, less than 20 feet to my left, with his back to me. I moved back and my eyes searched the area around me. I pick up a pretty heavy rock and I carefully check on him again. His back is still turned, but he's searching through the trees, hunched down lower to the ground now. I made a snap decision with everything I had left, and I threw the rock behind me and to the right. It clattered through the branches of trees and made one hell of a noise. I watched him immediately bolt in its direction, laughing. He fucking laughed. I paused a little, hearing his footsteps get quieter until I thought I wouldn't be so visible to him, and I moved and threw myself forward. I ran, trying to put as much distance between us as possible, but I was also aware that I was getting further and further away from my house. I knew there had to be a stream somewhere close. If I found this stream, I could follow it to its borders, where the land runs parallel to some of the footpaths. I ran and ran until the trees finally cleared and I could just make out another field through them on the other side. I thanked God and pushed myself a little bit further till I'm out of the trees and the ground disappears from below my feet, and I head over the shoulders to the stream embankment. I crash into the water below, my open mouth and lungs filling with muddy water. As I splutter it out, I both feel relieved to have found the stream and terrified that he's heard me. My phone is also now ruined. I slowly make my way downstream as quiet as possible, listening out for him the whole time as the stream borders the woods, looking up periodically just in case. After a while, maybe half an hour, I notice the trees begin to thin out and realize this is the edge of the woods where I would have been exiting if there was a pathway connected to the original one I had been on. If I ran, I could get home in less than 20 minutes. So as quietly as I could, I dragged myself on my stomach back up the embankment army style, wanting to stay as low as possible. I peeked over the top. I could just make out the opening of the woods exit path about 50 feet away. I sat and scanned the forest line for a couple minutes, my eyes trying to make any sort of movement out, despite it being like pitch black out. I see nothing. I couldn't hear anything either, so I pushed myself up and sprinted as fast as I could across the field onto the pathway. I knew the gate I'd entered through was in the adjoining field. It really wasn't that far. I was so happy to get away. "You fucking bitch!" I heard a man yell from across the field. I swear my legs nearly gave out then and there. He had been waiting for me. I turned my head and saw him full on sprinting out of the woods. I screamed and pushed myself further, tears coating my face. All I could do was run. I crossed into the main field now, and I could see the moonlight shining off the metal gate. My house was just about 5 minutes away after that. I've never focused on anything as much as that gate. He was way faster than me and getting closer and closer, screaming at me the whole time about how he was gonna slit my throat. I ran and ran, pushing myself up and over the gate and ran up the road. I looked over as I made the turn for my road. He was still fucking following me. I raced up my driveway and threw myself through the door, running into the living room crying and screaming hysterically, pointed behind me towards the door, and my dad ran outside while my mom grabbed a hold of me as I was collapsing and shaking. As it turns out, my parents had already called the police because I said I was going out for an hour at 7 and it was now past 12 a.m. and I hadn't answered when they called my now broken phone, which was very unlike me. We called the police again to explain and they came and I gave a full statement. Both my parents and the police were horrified. Nothing like this ever happens here in this town. There hasn't been a reported rape or murder in the last 100 years, but one look at me and it was obvious that I was telling the truth. I was covered head to toe in cuts and bruises, soaking wet in mud and blood. I won't go into how this experience changed me, it's pretty depressing, but I will say that the thing that scares me the most is that they never even had a suspect. Despite him following me so closely, he was gone by the time my dad ran downstairs. That guy is still out there, and who knows what he's really capable of. This story is told from the perspective of a female. This happened to me back in 2008 when I was 16 years old. I was pretty high at the time, so I could have just been having a bad trip and being really paranoid, but I thought about it a lot, and I feel like I just managed to escape a dangerous situation. I had just turned 16, which is kind of a big deal, and instead of being at home celebrating with my friends, I was stuck in a town hundreds of kilometers away from them. It was a beautiful, vibrant town. I just didn't know anybody there. Except for this guy named Dave. He was 21 years old and he was the only one I did know there, but even then, I didn't know him that well. I had met him once when I was visiting my hometown. However, I was lonely, and as a 16-year-old, spending your birthday alone is literally the worst thing you can do, so I was desperate to go out and have some fun. Dave invited me to go to an overnight trance festival with him and his friends. At first, my mom was completely against the idea, but Dave agreed to meet up with the family and pretend that I knew him a lot better than I actually did. He was a very mild-mannered and charming guy, and this coupled with the fact that my mom felt bad for my 16th birthday being so shitty was enough to convince my mom to let me go. I was extremely excited. It was my first festival and I was going with some older guys. It was gonna be the best birthday ever. For those of you who don't know what this kind of festival is, it's like a big outdoor rave that provides very psychedelic visuals. There's always a lot of electric music, art, and performances going on. Oh, and did I mention a slew of drugs being passed around constantly? The festival was being held in the middle of a wooded area about an hour's drive away from where I was staying at with my parents. This is relevant later on in the story. I had never met Dave's friends, but they seemed okay. There was this one guy that made me feel a little bit uncomfortable though. He kept on looking at me like I was food. We'll call him Mike, because I don't even remember his real name. I wasn't gonna let him ruin my evening, though. The night started with us smoking some weed, which I was no stranger to, and then they convinced me to snort some MDMA. It was my first time, but like I said, I was no stranger to drugs, so I obliged. We then went to the dance floor and I had an absolute blast. I was way too high to care about anything else but the music and the way it felt to move my body. I started to feel a little overwhelmed being in the thick of it, so I moved off to the side. I could still hear and dance to the music, but it was a bit more chilled out. I slowly became aware of a conversation taking place behind me. These people were saying pretty odd things. The first guy says, "See that girl? She's one of my girls. She knows how to treat you right. Just see how she moves." The second guy says, "Yeah, she does look good." The first man then goes on to describe all the things this girl can do. Some pretty intense sexual things. I just thought, damn, this girl sounds hardcore. I even looked around to try to spot her, and there were a couple ladies nearby, but I had no idea which one it was, so I just carried on dancing. After a while, the first man encouraged the other to go dance with this girl, and she would give him a, quote, taste of what she can do. And to my surprise, the man comes up and tries to start dancing with me. I stopped dead, looked at him, and then turned around to see who was calling me his girl. And there's Mike, standing there and leering at me. I'm standing there in shock when Dave rushes over and whispers, "We have to go," and pulls me off the dance floor. I go with him, thinking that he is my savior, and he takes me over to some jungle gyms overlooking the festival. I managed to find a comfortable corner of the jungle gym and just start enjoying the evening air, the fire dancers, and the distance dance floor when I spotted Mike fairly close in an animated conversation with the guy from earlier. The guy finally handed over some money as I was trying to figure out what was going on when Dave and his friends came over to the place where I was happily settled. They surrounded me and offered me a line of something. I ask what it is, but they won't tell me, so I just decline it. There are 4 of them standing very, very close to me, completely trapping me. One of them is shining a torch in my face, and they will just not take no for an answer. They bargained me for what felt like 10 minutes before I finally gave in. As soon as I had taken the line, Dave said we could head over to the car. I was already way too suspicious to ever go near that car again, so I asked them if I could go and dance real quick, and I'd go with them. I ran off to the dance floor, pretending to be excited and get to dancing, and pushed my way right into the thick of the crowd. From there, I worked my way to the front and then slipped into the surrounding woods. I hid behind the closest tent and tried to plan out what to do next, when my phone blew with texts and calls from them asking where I was. I had literally been gone for like 2 minutes. Why were they so worried? I began moving stealthily from one tent to the next, hiding between trees and being extremely paranoid. As I was switching between hiding spaces, I heard 2 guys approaching me, so I dove into some bushes. I had no idea who they were, and I was about to ask them to help me when I heard one of them describing my exact outfit and description to the other. I was so scared. I had never seen these 2 amongst the group I was with. How would have they known what I looked like and what I was wearing? More importantly, why were they looking for me? I just had no idea what to do. I was scared that if I phoned my mom, I would get into huge trouble, and who knew how long it would take for her to get here. I had no idea who to trust and no plan. I just continued moving through the woods and feeling helpless and terrified when I spotted a campfire eventually. Then and there, I decided just to run towards it. When I ran towards it, there was a group of about 15 very high-looking hippies jamming to some music and having a good time, so I sat there with them. They welcomed me warmly and let me sit with them for the remainder of the night. I didn't tell them what was going on. I wasn't sure I even believed it myself. After a few hours, Dave finally found me and tried to get me to leave with him. I refused, so he just sat there until sunrise. I then called my mom to come get me. The reason why I didn't earlier is because I didn't want my mom to pick me up while I was high, and I didn't also want to call her at an ungodly hour of the night. So anyways, I went home and never spoke to Dave again. So that's the night I was saved by some random hippies in the woods. This is gonna be short, but the memory sprung into my mind a couple of days back and I thought it would be worth sharing. I live in North Wales, United Kingdom. For anyone who's had the pleasure of visiting, it truly is a beautiful place to live, though, for an adolescent boy, it is certainly lacking things to do. As a result, my friends and I would often find ourselves mindlessly exploring areas of countryside and coastline. Despite it being quite sparsely populated, in comparison to the closest cities, there's a dual carriageway running right along the coast from Wales into England. Also, train tracks run alongside this road for most of its course, occasionally passing overhead via a small cement bridge. Anyway, there was one night a few years ago when about 4 of us randomly decided to try and explore the inside of one of these bridges, as one of the members of the group had spotted a manhole cover nearby, which we believed to be an entrance. Upon closer inspection, we discovered that several tools would be required in order to gain entry. We returned with the necessary equipment and proceeded to unbolt the cover. This had to be done stealthily as the train track was right beside us. Not close enough to be of any danger, but definitely a significantly small distance to cause panic for any train driver, and panic usually means police. It wasn't long before we removed the heavy steel disc and had started descending the ladder down into the structure. Once we had all safely reached the bottom, we decided to progress to the other side. At this point, we are totally confined into narrow space that leads into the main area. If you're confused as what the hell the bridge is supposed to be, you probably should be, because it was rather peculiar. I mean, I would have never known that there was even an inside had we not found the manhole. So, as we squeeze and crouch, and at one point scrape along the hallway to the other side of the structure, there's a growing sense of claustrophobia between us. The distance from one end to the other is surprisingly long, but by the halfway point, you can look down through the narrow gaps onto the motorway below. This was actually pretty cool, which helped us stay calm in such a strange way. Anyways, at this point, apart from mild discomfort and confinement, we are just still a group of guys on an adventure. This is about to change dramatically though. Anyways, no more than a few meters beyond the halfway point, one of us claimed to see an object in the distance at the far end. Slightly hesitantly, we agreed to investigate. Bad move. I had reached the end first, and let me tell you, I had never felt the same sense of dread before or since. In front of me was a single fold-away chair, positioned facing a wall. On the wall was a partially torn page from a newspaper or magazine, showing a fully naked lady in an erotic position. The reason why I don't just refer to it as porn is because there was something different about it. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it seemed more sinister than sexy, if that makes any sense. More disturbingly was that the eyes of the woman on display had been cut from the page, removed with precision, not just hastily ripped off. The scene that lay before us had rendered us completely speechless, and an overpowering sense of panic could be felt collectively. That was when we found the condom, the horrendous, gut-wrenching, blood-drenched condom. Needless to say, we got the fuck out of there as fast as humanly possible, smashing our knees and shins against the sharp cement edges that lined the path to the ladder by which we had entered. Of course, we were also all praying to God that the manhole hadn't been resealed, as it was impossible to tell until you reached the ladder itself. Thankfully, the exit route was clear, and we all dashed away as fast as our legs could carry us. I'm sure that this ending comes as a disappointment to some of you reading this, as we luckily never bumped into the twisted individual who sits in that chair, but I must stress how radically out of the norm this place was giving, especially based off where I live. The reason why I mentioned the population earlier was with purpose. There are easily enough people here to escape the realms of crazy country folk, yet nowhere near enough people to have someone clearly lose grip on society without somebody taking notice. For example, there was literally only one homeless man who everyone in the area knew and grew fond of, eventually resulting in a mass gathering at his funeral when he passed away. I sometimes think, though not recently as I had more or less forgotten about that night entirely, about the person who climbs down to that bridge and navigates through the darkness to sit there facing the wall and do God knows whatever results in that condom full of blood. You honestly couldn't envision a more surreal situation. It has just come to my realization that what we unearthed that night has not once been uttered to another soul. As a naive teenager, it was the type of thing you just wanted to forget, but thinking about it, we probably should have told the police, or let someone know about it, because whoever was down there was obviously not a healthy-minded individual. So there you have it. Apologies for the length. I got a little carried away as this is my first Let's Not Meet post, and I wanted to make the reading experience as similar to reality as I could. Now, I'm a few years older and hopefully a bit braver. I'm considering going down there again, accompanied of course, just to see what fucked up shit might be waiting. This could well happen in the next couple of days, and rest assured I will 100% post an update as I currently have no job, so time is plentiful. Thanks.